Hi everyone, so I'm Caitlin and I wanted to make this video today to share with you guys my personal story. I want to start off by saying I actually had no intentions of sharing this story anytime soon until I took a class this semester for my nutrition degree and shared my story through a workshop, and the response was completely overwhelming, and it made me realize that my story needs to be shared more and that I need to tell people what I've gone through to try and help others, to help people understand what it's like to have dealt with what I dealt with. And I've decided to post at least weekly videos where I will pick a topic tied into my story, tied into food, tied into things that are relevant in my life that I hope you guys will all enjoy and will help you guys all realize what it's like to have gone through what I've gone through. So, here we go. So 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. And 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder that I am treated with medication every day so that I can be okay. So here's my story. So looking back for as long as I can remember, I've never felt pretty enough. I've never felt skinny enough. I've never felt good enough. I've just never had that self-confidence that I needed to get through my day. So the first time I remember really getting fixated on food was at the end of grade 12. I had just turned 18. Everyone was asking me what I was going to do after high school. I felt like I had to have it figured out, and I didn't. I had no idea what I wanted to do, no idea where my life was going to take me. And I literally felt like my world was spinning. And I was so overwhelmed. I felt completely out of control. And the one thing I could control was what I put in my mouth. So I slowly started restricting my calories. I slowly started lying about telling people that I was lactose intolerant, so I didn't have to eat cheese because cheese started scaring me because of how high in fat it was. And I slowly started taking things out of my diet and losing some weight. So the first couple pounds I lost, I remember feeling good about myself. I remember people commenting on it, and I distinctly remember one day I had fought a flu bug. I remember looking at myself in the mirror and grabbing at my skin and realizing that I had lost some weight, and I literally got a high off of it. And from then on, I was hooked. I was past the point of no return and started sliding down a slope pretty fast. So that summer, I actually got a job working at the bank, and I had started really restricting my calories by July. To the point I was probably eating one meal a day. I was very cautious about what it was. I had to know all the nutrition. I had to make sure that I had all the nutritional information. I would Google how many calories were in a banana, how many calories were in an apple, and I would choose whatever one had the least amount of calories, and I would have 2 bites of it and then throw it out. And when I was working at the bank, one of my first clients actually came up to the till. I hadn't eaten that day, and I actually fainted. Because of the lack of calories, and I hit my head on the floor. I split my knee open on the desk, and I remember coming to, laying on the floor, and everyone was surrounding me and making sure I was okay. And I remember just saying, "It's okay, I just had the flu. It's probably because of that." And I remember hobbling out to my car. My knee was bleeding, and sitting in my car and just crying and feeling so helpless. And but I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop not eating. And I would get a high off of, Monday I didn't have anything to eat until 2 o'clock, and then by Thursday I was able to go until 3 o'clock without putting food into my system. And how much further could I go without eating anything? And I remember it was in the morning. I literally would wake up in bed and I would figure out if I had to eat that day, if I had plans to eat with people, and where I would go, what I would eat. It completely consumed every second of my day. Come September, I decided to move from Alberta to Dalhousie and to go to school in Halifax. And for me, that was great. I would no longer be living around my family, so that because they would hold me accountable to some degree. By the time that I moved out to Halifax, I no longer had a menstrual cycle because my body fat was too low, and my hair was literally falling out. I remember being at the hotel waiting to move into res with my mom, and going to the blow dry my hair in the morning, and the floor was literally littered with hair. I remember I couldn't even see the tile, and I went to my mom crying, and I said, if I go bald, please promise me that you'll buy me a wig. And she asked me what was wrong and why my hair was falling out, and I assured her everything was okay and that I had no idea why it was falling out. And on that trip, I made sure that I ate a couple times in front of her, and the anxiety that I would get from eating was incredible. I would be so paranoid that I would eat one thing and I would put on 5 pounds, and I was incredibly anxious around food. When food was around in front of me, especially if it was something that I hadn't planned in for the day, that I hadn't accounted for calories during my day, I would get very irritable, very moody. I would snap at everyone that was around me. So by the time my mom left me in Halifax, I remember her saying to me, "Are you sure you're okay? Promise me you're okay. If you aren't okay, promise me that you'll call and we'll get you the help that you need." And I assured her everything was fine, that I was fine, and I wasn't. So I started the lies that I started telling were incredible. I had an excuse for everything. I had an excuse to why I couldn't show up to any meals. I'd go to meal hall as much as probably twice a week. If I hadn't accounted for meal hall that day, I would lock myself in my dorm room, or I would go out so that I wasn't around for when the people on the floor wanted to go get food. I started eating only one granola bar a day. It was 110 calories. I got myself a membership at the gym, and I would go to the gym and I'd run on the treadmill until I saw 110 calories. And as long as I was at 0 calories by the end of the day, it was a good day for me. It was a win. So I also started drinking Diet Pepsi because the carbonation would make me feel full, but I was very secretive about it. I didn't want anyone to know that I was drinking Diet Pepsi because I thought if they knew, that they would know that I had an eating disorder. So I'd actually buy the Diet Pepsi in the vending machine at the bottom of the res building. I would throw it in my purse and run back to my room and chug it with the door closed and locked because I was so paranoid that people would know. And I just slowly got more and more isolated, more and more depressed. Ironically, every pound that I lost, even though that's what I was trying to do, I became more miserable. And I started wearing more and more clothes to hide the fact that I was getting incredibly skinny. I actually don't know how much I weighed by the end of it. I can guess that I was close to 80 pounds by the end of my eating disorder. And I really suffered to myself. I became a very irritable person. I was very miserable. I remember my parents coming to visit one time in Halifax, and we were going to go out for supper at a restaurant, and so I Googled the restaurant and the menu to figure out what I could eat. I had accounted for it, and we were supposed to eat at 6 o'clock at night, and so I'd planned my whole day around having to go to eat with my parents, because I knew that if I was with my parents, I'd have to at least put something into my body. And my parents actually ended up running an hour or so late, which for me today wouldn't be a big deal, and I lost it on my parents. I remember telling them that they were the worst parents ever, and how could they do this to me, and how could they mess up my whole day all over an hour, and how I had planned my day food-wise, and the anxiety that ran into that I had, and that it was an hour later that I was going to eat, and how would I work off this? How would I get rid of this? Like work off the salad before I had to go to bed and everything. So by the time Christmas rolled around, I had lost an incredible amount of weight. My hair was still falling out. I was gaunt looking. I still had no menstrual cycle for several months now. I was absolutely exhausted all the time. I slept a lot. I would only be able to go out with my friends for about an hour, and then I would get very anxious around everyone, and so I'd actually have to go home. And so by Christmas time, I got home, and my parents sat me down and talked to me about, how I was looking and everything, and promised me that if I told them I wanted to go back to Halifax, and for the second semester, and so they made me promise that I would go into therapy to help me, and that was the only way that they would let me go back to Halifax. And so I agreed to it, because to me that was the only way I could get back, even though I had no intentions of fulfilling that. So I think I went to 2 therapy sessions. I lied to her the whole time about what I was eating, and I told her everything was fine and that my parents were just paranoid. And I just kept canceling my appointments with her. I remember one of the girls that lived on res with me came and talked to me one day and said, we've all noticed that you've lost a lot of weight and that you're not eating meals with us and that you're not doing any of that stuff with us, and is everything okay? And I remember saying, yeah, I'm in therapy for just dealing with some stuff, but everything's fine. And I remember being agitated that people are questioning me about it, and now looking back, it was just because that they cared and they could see that I was drowning, and but I wasn't willing to get help at that point, and I wasn't willing to admit that I needed help. So by the time February rolled around, I decided to go home for reading week, and that's when I hit rock bottom, and that's when everything just kind of came pummeling down. I finally admitted to my parents on that trip that I needed help, and that I was very sick, and that I couldn't do this on my own. I honestly thought at that point I was going to die. And I remember saying to my mom, just let me die. Just let me. I said, I'll never get better. I can't get myself through this. There's no way I'm going to get better. Just let me die. And my mom said, you've got to be effing kidding me if you think I'm going to sit here and watch you slowly kill yourself. And I remember saying to her, I feel like every day I dig my grave just a little further, and I can't. I'm so deep now that I can't climb out. And I did truly believe at that point that this was going to kill me. And I was terrified. And so I finally said, I need to get help and I need to get myself better. So the first week that I was home, my parents actually flew back to Halifax at one point and cleaned out my dorm room for me, and my friends at Halifax helped them do it. And they came back with all my stuff, and I spent the first week laying on the couch crying my eyes out and being very overwhelmed, not having any idea how I was going to get better, if I was going to get better. I started going to doctor's appointments, getting my vitals taken so that they could monitor my heart rate, my blood pressure. I had to get blood work done, all that stuff to make sure that I hadn't done any irreversible damage to myself. I started dealing with a therapist who dealt directly with eating disorders, and I started with a dietitian. And the first couple times, I just remember still kind of lying about what I was eating, and because I was embarrassed. I was completely embarrassed by the fact that I didn't eat, and I remember people saying to me, well, just start eating, and if it was that easy, I would have done it. The anxiety that I had with eating food it wasn't an option. I couldn't eat during the day, and so I remember the dietitian telling me that because I hadn't had a menstrual cycle for over a year, that the chance of me carrying a pregnancy, getting pregnant and carrying a pregnancy would be low, and the chance that I'll develop osteoporosis further on in life would be high, as well as the fact that I could suffer from other disorders like postpartum depression if I were to carry a pregnancy, that would be high as well. And I remember being very overwhelmed, and it was the first time I realized that I had done some pretty serious damage to my body that I would deal with for the rest of my life. And I was still very moody, very irrational, very overwhelmed. I remember my mom had bought a book about how to deal with someone with an eating disorder, and I found the book, and I was so offended. I was so irate with her. I got so mad. And she was just trying to help, and she was just trying to understand. And I felt it was very selfish of me. I didn't realize that I was affecting other people. And looking back now, I have 2 kids of my own, and I can't imagine watching them go through what I went through and feeling like I couldn't help them, or try to understand what they were going through and trying to understand how to help them. And I definitely did some pretty serious damage to some relationships. I was a constant liar about food. I mean, my parents or my siblings couldn't even trust if they asked me what I ate for breakfast. They couldn't even trust that I was telling them the truth about what I told them I had eaten. And that's such a basic thing. It took me a while to regain a lot of trust, and a lot of relationships were pretty seriously hurt. And I mean, my family are the most supportive people that you will ever meet in your whole entire life, and they have my back, and they were trying so hard to help me, and I kept pushing them away. And finally got to a spot where I could be honest with them about good days I was having, bad days I was having, recovery was difficult in the fact that I went from weighing about 80 pounds to putting on about 20, 30 pounds really quickly because I completely shot my metabolism. I remember the therapist saying, you were on one side of the pendulum, now you're going to the other side, and it can be very difficult to get that. So it definitely triggered a bit of a relapse. I had to be honest with myself. I had to come to terms with what I had done. And I remember my therapist saying to me too, you're always going to be in recovery for this eating disorder. The thoughts aren't going to go away. You're just going to learn how to cope with them. And I can tell you today that the thoughts are still there, that I have bad days, I have good days, but I am healthy and that I get myself through the day and I can do what I need to do, thought-wise, to make sure that I'm okay. And I have gone from having a very poor relationship of fear of food to having a healthy relationship. I've got 1 year left in a degree for nutrition, and absolutely my eating disorder has led me to this degree. And I think that it's time that my story is shared and that people understand what it's like to have an eating disorder, the anxiety that you have with food, the severity of it, and that I shouldn't be ashamed of what I've gone through, and I shouldn't be ashamed that I've had an eating disorder and that I've dealt with it. And I distinctly remember people telling me, you're going to figure out your strength as you go through this. And I can say to you today that I battled myself and I won. And I truly believe that I can tackle anything that comes my way. And thank goodness, I have been able to carry 2 successful pregnancies, and I've got 2 boys that I love more than anything. And the therapist was right. After the birth of my second son, I dealt with postpartum, and I never realized that my eating disorder would trigger other things in my life, and I would have to deal with other things. But I think that it's time that I share my story and that I get it out there and that I share with you guys how I have gone into recovery, how I deal with food now, how I have a healthy relationship with food, and what I've done and the steps I've taken to get to where I've gotten. And I hope that you guys all liked the story and appreciated it. And any comments, anything, and I hope you guys start following my videos and being with me through this journey, as I'm definitely still on it. And I don't think recovery was always going to be there for me, and I am no longer ashamed to say that I have had anorexia, that I was anorexic, and that I'm okay now.